So I'm going to tell you the story of Kilombero rice, much of which some of you may know. But I think it's worth going through again just to illustrate how starting with buying a product and a trading relationship can grow into a relationship and a partnership with a whole community, and lots of spin-offs from that. So I certainly knew of Kilombero rice for a long time and bought it, but I was unaware till I got directly involved of all that had gone behind it. So CASFA, who sell the Kilombero rice, Kaporo Smallholder Farmers Association, was established in 2001, so before we had any contact with them, with the aim of improving the livelihood of its members. It's a large association of smallholder farmers, divided into 4 associations, but coming together under a single board. The membership has varied over the years, but it's currently around 4,000 farmers are members, and of those 60% are women. In 2008, a link was formed between CASFA and the Balmore Trust. This was really the result of a meeting at a Malawi trade event hosted in Glasgow by the Scottish Government. And the relationship has built from then and gone on from strength to strength. And as a result of that and discussions, JTS was founded and imported its first container of Kilombero rice in 2009. And I think that all sounds great, but once you start buying products, you realise how many challenges there are behind the whole project. And it became very clear that we needed to understand those many challenges. If we're going to sell in a UK market and offer a UK market, how can we get consistent crop quality? How can we improve the efficiency of the labour behind the product? As we got to know the community, how particularly to support women, and you've heard about that from Sarah as well. For me, part of it is understanding actually how the product is grown, because it helps understand where some of the issues arise. And I think I only realised fairly recently how much backbreaking work goes into the Kilombero rice that we buy and eat. It starts with the farmers preparing their fields, and they do this either with ox-drawn ploughs, or for many farmers and small farmers still with a handheld hoe. That happens round about December each year, and the timing of it depends totally on having rains, and I'll come back to that and the effect of climate. Once the fields are prepared, then the seeds are sown in nurseries, and they're sown by hand, as you can see here with this woman on the left. This, over the space of a few weeks, if the climate is right, then the seedlings sprout in the nursery fields. This is what they look like at that point. They're then transplanted out into the main rice growing fields. These are transplanted one stalk at a time by hand into the fields. There's no mechanization in this product. In this process, that takes a long time and a lot of work, and you can see farmers planting them out here. And these fields are irrigated by rainfall. This is not the sort of paddy fields that we know from stories of rice growing in Asia. These are fields that get their water from rainfall. So it has to rain at the right time for this to work. I didn't understand really how long it took to grow Kilombero rice. It's an interesting product. It's very tall. I always thought rice was quite short. This is Kilombero rice. It takes 6 months to grow. And so you can imagine if something goes wrong in that process, there's no way of growing another crop that year. Threshing is done by hand. They pick up bundles of the rice and bash it against logs to thresh the rice. So just a little bit of background to understand where some of the issues have come from. And one of the first big project, and probably one of the most successful projects that Balmore Trust and JTS did with CASFA, was this one, which was funded by a grant from the Scottish Government Malawi Development Programme between 2013 and 2016, improving livelihoods of rice farmers in Karonga through seed multiplication and developing a market. This is the report from the project, and I would commend it to anybody who wants to know more about some of the background to what we do. I think it's available on the True Origin website. but it's called Just Rice. And this was the report from the project, which reported on the main aims, which were improving the quality and consistency of the rice crop. And this was done by purchasing high quality Kilombero rice seed from a research lab and distributing it to key farmers who grew it 1 year and then redistributed that crop around a much larger number of farmers the following year. And alongside that, a training program for farmers, helping them understand how if they use certified high quality seed, they will get better crops and better quality product that will guarantee them better price for their product. Alongside that, also a supply of tarpaulins. You may wonder why, but when the rice has been threshed, it's left to dry on the ground. Drying it on tarpaulins means they get a cleaner product that then is higher quality and easier to take to market. So simple things like supplying tarpaulins make a difference. As part of the project, there was also thought given to inputs that might make life easier for the farmers, and 50 ox carts were purchased, sold to the farmers on a hire purchase basis, with the funds recouped from that being used to add more. And the third part of the grant was to employ a marketing officer in Scotland to develop markets for the rice. So this was a really exciting project, I think very successful, and the start of a whole lot of other work. So these are just some things that I think it highlighted we needed to move on to, and I'm going to take you through some of those just in a little bit more detail. For me, one of the really interesting things, when you get a grant such as these small government grants, you report back at the end of the grant, and then we're not always very good at following up to see what happens eventually. And for me, that's really what matters. What are we achieving long term? So we know that the certified seed resulted in better crops. We were really excited last year to hear that after 10 years later, CASFA is now a certified seed producer selling seed to other farmers in the area. And I think that's a real positive outcome to that project. So having convinced them that they should use certified seed, them seeing the benefits, they're now producing seed and selling it on to other farmers and organisations. And I think that's one of the really exciting benefits, but that we didn't know about until 10 years on. I talked about threshing being done by hand, and obviously that's very labour intensive, and there was a lot of discussion about could that be improved with some threshing machines, and a project to build some simple wooden threshing machines to see if that worked. And this again was funded by a government grant. This is just showing the work involved in the threshing for a second. That's how you thresh your rice. So it seemed logical to try and improve things from that. Unfortunately, this was not a success at the time. The threshing machines that were made were, although they were very simple machines, they were heavy. Now, a lot of these farm fields have no paths to them, no road access, and no way of getting heavy machines in. So the threshing machines could not reach where they were needed. So there was a big learning from that if we're going to actually work with the farmers to look at equipment that might help, we needed to be really sure it was right for the environment that they're farming. These farms are small, but they're often a long way away from where they live, and there's often no easy access to them. A big issue for the farmers is transporting goods. This is after you've threshed your rice, how do you get it back to the market or to your home? And unless you're fortunate enough to have an ox cart and a way of getting your ox cart to your field, the only way is to carry it on your head. And that was work done by women. I certainly don't fancy walking quite a number of miles with a 50-kilogram bag of rice on my head. That's what these bags weigh. So that's where things like the ox carts become hugely beneficial for the communities and the farmers. Oh, jumping ahead, sorry. So this is an old ox cart. You can see it's been well used, and it's used for transporting rice, for transporting lots of other crops, for transporting animals, people, anything you can think of. The initial ox carts were purchased for the community, but then in 2016, Howard Msukwa, who many of you may have met on some of his visits to the UK, decided to set up a local workshop with support from Paul Tofield, who was involved with the Balmore Trust at that time. And he has helped Howard get tools for his workshop and supported him in setting it up. And there's now quite a thriving workshop in the community, and they build their own ox carts. So we send funds for the materials and they could build the carts on site. And it results in employment, but also less costly carts. So this is how they start, with them welding the metal parts, then adding wooden parts of the cart. They need two wheels for the bottom, and then a tow bar. And this is a finished one that was sent out recently. They are, of course, designed to be pulled by oxen, but most of the ones I've seen pictures of being collected were actually being pulled away by motorbikes, which is a common way of getting around where there is road access. But they are designed for use by oxen. So at the end of last year, we were able to send money out for a further 6 ox carts. They actually managed to produce 7. So this is an ongoing project to continue working with the farmers to supply ox carts who are used by everybody in the community. Another thing that the workshop did has been building school desks for local schools, and this has been hugely appreciated. Again, it provides work for people, but it helps the schools. But one of the spin-offs from the workshop is that what started as a small local workshop has become a youth skills training centre for the community. So it was recognised that many young people drop out of school and have no easy way to gain skills that they can use to generate an income. So the workshop now trains young people in carpentry, in welding, in tailoring, in mechanics, and most recently this year they're adding knitting to their skill set. So this has been a big spin-off from what started as a small local workshop, and there's a whole lot of community projects evolving around that. Howard is registering this area of work as a formal foundation in Malawi, and we've been able to support them with help with fees to register the foundation and connecting together a network of supporters in Scotland who are supporting this work. This is a young woman who's been trained in carpentry in the skills centre. She was in an abusive marriage, got divorced and had no way of earning money, and is now trained in furniture making and producing some beautiful pieces, I believe. Another project that we had a grant for rose out of some of the marketing discussions around the Kilombero rice. I think it was felt that if we had a fair trade certification for the rice, that would improve sales and improve our ability to market it. So this was a grant called Strengthening Consumer Confidence in Kilombero Rice by Achieving WFTO Certification. For those of you who know the different fair trade certifications, gaining World Fair Trade Organization guaranteed member status is quite a big achievement. It involves a lot of scrutiny of all the processes around the organization, not just the product, but around how the organization works. And this was a big project for an organization like CASFA. It involves a lot of paperwork, auditing, reporting. And so we employed a project manager from the grant to work with CASFA. Again, a successful outcome, made significantly more complicated by the fact that in the middle of the grant, there was a little thing called COVID, and it wasn't possible to get auditors to visit CASFA at the time. But one of the things that arose from that was a recognition in CASFA about the importance of gender equity and supporting women. And I think there was clearly some of that recognition at higher level in CASFA came from the work they had to do around gender to get the WFTO status. So that was a spin-off that we didn't expect, but has clearly been important. And one project we've been supporting working with the women is what is called Grace's Briquette Project, which started, I think, with conversations between Mary Popple, who I think is on the call, who was previous chair of True Origin, and a rice farmer called Grace. And this was a project that started at the end of 2020. and was set up to support two groups of women who wished to establish businesses making fuel briquettes from waste rice husks. And this is what they produced. They just looked like charcoal briquettes. The aim was to reduce the need for women to walk miles to collect firewood, which is now actually illegal in Malawi, to reduce, and alongside that, to reduce deforestation, to make good use of rice husks, which are just a waste product, which were otherwise left to rot in heaps, to provide an alternative, much needed source of fuel and clean fuel for women, and to provide a potential source of income for the women in this rural part of Malawi. So we've been working with them since 2020, and the first stage was to build what we thought were going to be smallish buildings for them to set up their equipment. I'd no idea, this was one of the first projects I was involved with. I'd no idea how you set about building a building in Malawi, but this is how you deliver a pile of bricks and everyone sets to and moves the bricks to where they're needed. So this is the women in the group starting to build their own factory, essentially. This was them with some of the roofing materials. And this was the size of the buildings we realised were being put up, which were rather bigger than we initially anticipated. So they now have two significant buildings that they're using for these projects, and it's been great to see them go up. Progress was steady until COVID, when everything was held up. Oh, sorry. And we were pleased to be able to support the women during COVID with things like buckets for hand washing, soap and face masks. And then the project carried on. The buildings were completed, but took about 9 months to get them connected to electricity. It's a huge problem in Malawi, access to power, and that took a lot of time and hard work on the part of the CASFA team who were supporting the women to achieve that. But finally, the buildings were connected to electricity and they were able to get their briquette making machines going. Their first briquettes that were made were not very successful. They weren't of a consistency that burned adequately. And we funded the women to go and visit another group who were making similar briquettes and look at their recipe to make sure they were getting it right. And that led to successful briquette production. And this was them at the end of, I think, 2024, showing off the first really successful fuel briquettes that they had made. We had a GP who was in Malawi who went out to visit, who got given a bag of these fuel briquettes and said they burn beautifully. So the question was where to go after that. They could make briquettes, but this was all happening on a relatively small scale. The first thing the women wanted to do was register the groups as official cooperatives that would allow them to be businesses in their own rights rather than just parts of CASFA. So we were able to support them with some funds for the necessary training that they had to have to become co-ops. And this is one group in some of their training. The next thing they want to do is try and source some money to get a bigger and more powerful briquette making machine that would allow them to upscale the whole project and turn it into a financially viable business. They have some applications in Malawi for funding at the moment. We're waiting to hear if that is successful. Otherwise, we will be looking to try and help them raise the funds they need to upscale their business. And finally, I think you've heard a number of times tonight about climate change. Climate change for smallholder farmers all over the world is creating major challenges. And for these farmers in Malawi, traditional farming methods are still what they rely on, and these depend on having predictable weather patterns. If the rains don't arrive at the right time, the rice is delayed in planting, it means a shorter growing season and a less good crop, and you can't get back the 6 months that it takes to grow Kilombero rice. They've also suffered flood damage to their crop and drought while the crop is maturing. We had a grant for a project looking at possible sources of improving irrigation a number of years, and looked at constructing shallow wells around the area. There were 18 shallow wells constructed and supplying a mix of diesel and solar pumps, alongside some training and management of water resources. I think this was of mixed success. I think what it showed that shallow wells had some benefits but were of limited benefit. They could supplement rainfall, but they weren't enough on their own. So there is a need for better access to water. And the solar pumps that were supplied at that time were insufficiently powerful to irrigate the size of fields that the rice farmers needed. So there was a lot of learning from that. In the summer of 2023, while there was a cyclone in southern Malawi causing floods, there was a drought in northern Malawi threatening their harvest. And they asked us for funds.
Sorry, can I just interrupt a minute? We've got only a couple of minutes left. Have you got?
I've only got a couple more slides. Yeah. So we were able to supply funds for petrol pumps to provide a quick solution, but we don't see that as a long-term solution. The long-term solution is in solar pumps, and we're working with CASFA at the moment to try and understand which ones would be best for their needs. And I think I'm going to finish there just to say things do move on in Malawi. CASFA now owns a tractor that will benefit some of the farmers, but won't help the poorer smallholder farmers who really need our benefit. So there's lots of ongoing work around the rice farmers, and I'm going to stop there.